Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. I, 29 male, have always had a difficult relationship with my parents. Growing up, it was clear that my younger sister, 25 female, was the golden child. She received endless support and praise, while I was expected to fend for myself. My parents always favored her in obvious ways. For example, they paid for her private school tuition, while I attended public school. They funded her extracurricular activities, such as ballet and piano lessons, but I was told to get a part-time job if I wanted to join any clubs or sports. When it came time for college, my parents took out loans to cover her tuition, room, and board at a prestigious university. Meanwhile, I worked multiple jobs and took out student loans. My sister always had the newest clothes, gadgets, and even a car when she turned 16. I had to save up for years to buy a used car after high school. Despite all this, I worked hard to become independent and save for my future, including my wedding. Recently, my sister got married in a lavish ceremony. My parents went all out, paying for every detail: a high-end venue, a designer dress, an extravagant reception, and even a luxury honeymoon. They spared no expense to make her wedding a dream come true. While I was genuinely happy for my sister, it was another painful reminder of how differently my parents treated us. I couldn't help but think about my own upcoming wedding and how I would have to foot the bill myself. I got engaged to my fiancée, 28 female, about a year ago, and we started planning our wedding. I had saved diligently for years to afford the wedding of our dreams. But now my parents called me in a panic. They claimed that my father had a serious medical emergency and needed surgery that wasn't fully covered by insurance. They were in desperate need of $20,000 to cover the costs. Of course, I was concerned and wanted to help. Despite my savings being for my wedding, I transferred the money to them. I didn't ask too many questions because, at the time, I was overwhelmed with worry for my father's health. My fiancée was understanding, and we decided to postpone the wedding and scale back our plans. She's an angel. A few weeks later, my parents were acting strangely. They were evasive when I asked about my dad's health, and I noticed that they were going out more and seemed unusually happy for people dealing with a medical crisis. My suspicions grew, so I decided to look into it further. I first asked my parents for more specific details about the surgery, what kind it was, which hospital, the name of the doctor. They gave vague answers and seemed annoyed by my questions. This only increased my suspicion. I then contacted a family friend who is close to my parents. After a few casual conversations, he mentioned that my parents had been talking about my sister's honeymoon plans excitedly and how extravagant it was going to be, and how I've contributed a big amount towards it. This confirmed my worst fears. My heart sank as the reality set in. My parents had lied about the medical emergency to get my wedding fund and pay for my sister's lavish honeymoon. The so-called medical emergency was a lie. Instead, my parents used the money I gave them to pay for my sister's extravagant honeymoon to Europe. My sister and her husband had a lavish wedding funded by my parents, and they wanted to give her a dream honeymoon as well. I was furious. My parents had not only lied to me, but had stolen the money meant for my wedding. When I confronted them, they didn't even seem remorseful. They said that my sister deserved it more, and that I should understand since she was their little girl. They said I'm a man, and will need to provide and will earn for my wedding again, as my salary is good, and my fiancé comes from a very well-off family. This was the last straw for me. My fiancé and I decided to plan a small, secret wedding with just a few close friends and family members. We didn't inform my parents or my sister. Instead, we used the remaining money to ensure we would still have a meaningful celebration. After the wedding, I cut off contact with my parents. They were livid when they found out about the secret wedding. They were incredibly disappointed and hurt to be excluded. After a lot of thinking, I also decided to take legal action. I sued them for the $20,000 they lied to obtain from me. It was a tough decision, but I felt it was necessary to hold them accountable for their actions. The lawsuit dragged on, and my parents spent a significant amount of money on legal fees. In the end, I won the case and was awarded the full amount plus my legal fees and a compensation for emotional distress for having to postpone my wedding. Now, my parents are struggling financially, and they blame me for their hardships. They claim they can hardly make ends meet because of the legal costs and the repayment they have to give me. My sister has tried to reach out, accusing me of ruining the family and being selfish, but I feel justified in my actions. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for marrying in secret and suing my parents after they lied about a medical emergency to steal my wedding fund for my sister's honeymoon? OP's parents deceived OP and stole OP's hard-earned money. They made their bed, and now they have to lie in it. OP did nothing wrong by protecting himself and his future. Not the a-hole. What your parents did is beyond reprehensible. They prioritized your sister to an extreme degree, and it's only fair that they face the consequences of their actions. You deserve to have your wedding and your life without being manipulated and lied to. Cutting them off is the healthiest decision for your mental and emotional well-being. Not the a-hole. Your parents' actions were deceitful and manipulative. They didn't care about your happiness or well-being, only about spoiling your sister. You had every right to have your wedding the way you wanted and protect yourself from future financial aggression. They owe you, not the other way around. Not the a-hole. This is a classic case of toxic favoritism. Your parents not only lied, but showed blatant disrespect for you and your fiancé. You were right to cut them off and to live your life on your terms. They need to face the repercussions of their actions, and hopefully, they'll realize the extent of their wrongdoing. Update. After winning the legal battle and receiving the repayment from my parents, my wife and I decided to use the money to finally have the wedding we have always dreamed of. We planned a beautiful ceremony and reception, inviting all our friends and family, excluding my parents and sister. It was everything we had hoped for and more, and we couldn't have been happier. My parents, upon hearing about our plans for a new wedding, tried to reach out to make amends. They insisted that they wanted to be a part of our special day and promised to make things right. However, their apologies felt insincere, more about saving face than genuine remorse. We decided to stand firm on our decision and did not invite them. During this time, my sister also reached out, albeit more to express her frustration than apologize. She was again accusing me of being selfish and for parents' financial situation, claiming that I was tearing the family apart. I told her that the only people responsible for the rift in the family were our parents and herself. She didn't take it well and has since blocked me on all social media. The wedding went off without a hitch, and it was a joyous occasion, surrounded by those who truly cared about us. It felt liberating to celebrate our love without the shadow of my parents' betrayal hanging over us. As for my parents, they've continued to struggle financially. They reached out a few more times, pleading for help, asking to postpone their payments. But I stood my ground. I made it clear that while I don't wish them ill, I also cannot support them financially and cancel their debts after what they did. They needed to understand that their actions have consequences and that it's not my responsibility to bail them out. It's been a tough journey, but my wife and I are in a much better place now. We've set boundaries and are focusing on building a happy, healthy life together. The support from her family and our friends has been invaluable, and I've learned the importance of surrounding myself with people who respect and care for us genuinely. This will probably only make sense if I tell you a bit about my ex-friend. Let's call her Lucy. I met her in freshman year college, and she was part of a larger friend group because we all lived in the same hall. For as long as I've known her, she has had pretty significant mood swings. Sometimes she was a super sweet and caring person, but when she gets stressed out, she would become verbally and physically and blame everything in the universe if there's something negative happening in her life. Her A side has gotten progressively worse since college. I could write a whole book about Lucy, but I'll spare you the details because it's not directly related to the advice I'm trying to get. Over the last couple of years, each of the people in our friend group have cut contact with her, and I think I was probably the last one to still respond to her. Every conversation I have with her goes in circles, and she ends up back in a state of anger and frustration, and I usually hang up when she hurls verbal at me. I met my husband about 3 years ago, and he has always been incredibly supportive of me. I have vented to him many times about Lucy because interactions with her always leave me feeling emotionally drained and feeling like I'm going crazy. He has encouraged me many times to cut contact with her because it's not worth setting yourself on fire to keep her warm. So earlier this month, I blocked her. Earlier today, I ran into Lucy at the grocery store, and she confronted me about why I haven't been responding to her. She started screaming, so I left the grocery store and went home, But as I was pulling into my apartment parking lot, I see a car speeding towards me. Sure enough, it was Lucy's car. I think she was aiming for me, but I steered the car away, so she ended up crashing into the rear door behind me and destroying both our cars. Before I was able to compose myself after the crash, she drove off with the front part of her car missing. I called the police and told them everything. Thankfully, I'm uninjured. All afternoon, I've been calling insurance and trying to look for options to get the car fixed. Nothing is finalized yet, but the insurance agent said, judging by the pictures, he's not optimistic that it's fixable, worth fixing. I know I need to tell my husband, but how do I tell him the car he's been saving up for years and then spending months waiting for it to arrive is damaged beyond repair? Especially because I feel partially responsible since, in hindsight, I realize I should have cut contact with Lucy years ago. A part of me knows that outwardly he'll brush it off, say that he's happy that I'm safe and that objects can be replaced. But I'm scared that he'll resent me. He loves this car. He has a strong sentimental attachment to it because it's his first car, and he's even given it a cute nickname like a pet. We joke about how it's like his firstborn child. We don't have any kids yet. And it's the holidays. What kind of crap holiday present is it to find out that your brand new car that you got 2 weeks ago got totaled? I've tried looking at ways to buy him a new one, but I obviously can't make such a big financial decision without discussing it together. And the other problem is current delivery times for this car is 10+ months. It's a Tesla for anyone wondering why it takes so long. We could buy used, but used prices are even higher than new, and the used cars have 20K plus miles on them. He is on a business trip right now and will be coming back on Friday for the holidays. I'm struggling between deciding to tell him now or telling him in person when he gets back. What words can I even use to tell him? Has Lucy been arrested? It sounds like you need a restraining order. Call your husband and tell him that you're okay. Reassure him that you weren't hurt when the psychopath rammed into you at full speed. Tell him that she's been arrested and can't make another attempt on your life, that you're safe, so he doesn't need to come home. Explain to him that the car is badly damaged, but that you survived the attempted M. Your husband is going to be relieved that you're all right. He's going to be upset about the car, sure, but probably sometime later. Hearing the news that his wife was nearly K'd is going to take up his attention for a little while. Update. In hindsight, I was too hyper-focused on the car and didn't really fully process the fact that someone I've known for 7+ years tried to hurt me. As for breaking the news to my husband, that didn't turn out quite the way I expected. I knew that I had to tell him as soon as possible, and I was trying to figure out the best way to phrase it. But about 20 minutes after I made my post, he actually called me in a panic because he was afraid I was in a coma in the hospital or something. Turns out, his Tesla and the phone app has a lot more bells and whistles than I knew about. It sent him notifications and videos from the car's cameras about the crash, but he didn't see them until the evening. His company has a strict policy about only company-issued phones being allowed to be turned on while in the tech center office. So when he finished work and pulled out his personal phone, he was greeted by multiple notifications that a crash had occurred and links to the videos. Since by that point, it had been many hours since the crash, he was terrified that I had been seriously injured. At first, he was incredibly upset with me for not calling him immediately on his work phone. After I apologized profusely and explained the whole story, his frustration turned to concern and he insisted I go see a doctor to get a full physical, even though I felt fine. He then got the first flight he could find the next morning, and he's been spending the last 2 days with me and taking his work meetings remotely. I've apologized a couple times for not cutting my ex-friend Lucy off earlier, before my husband came into my life, and I've apologized for the loss of his car. But each time he just brushes it off and says something that melts my heart away like, "I'm happy the car did its job and protected you from Lucy." Or, "The car is a thing, and things are replaceable. You're not." The insurance paperwork still isn't finalized yet, but it's looking increasingly likely that the car will be a total loss. I think my husband placed an order, or at least is seriously contemplating placing a new order for a new car. We'll probably have to wait 10 or 12 months to get it, but in the meantime, we still have my car to drive, and we'll figure something out. My husband also wants us to do some marriage counseling, because he says I have a tendency to avoid or push off difficult conversations. After this week, I realize he's probably right, so we'll be exploring that early next year. As for me, I'm glad I escaped the crash mostly unscathed. I got an urgent care appointment for the next day, and the doctor concluded there wasn't anything seriously wrong with me, but recommended I get a more comprehensive check from my primary care physician next week. 2 of my teeth have been hurting since Tuesday, and I'm not sure if it's related to the crash. My husband suspects I might have bitten down too hard on my teeth as I was bracing myself for the crash and cracked something. But I made an appointment with the dentist next week to check. In my original post, I didn't say much about what happened with Lucy after the crash because the post was already getting long and it wasn't directly relevant to the advice I was seeking. But the police arrested her soon after the crash and called me to let me know. Apparently, it was pretty easy because they found her at home. I gave them her address, and the front section of her car was missing and beaten up. They asked her if she had been in an accident earlier that morning, and she told them a harrowing tale about how she barely escaped a violent motorcycle gang. When the police asked her why she didn't report it or seek assistance from emergency responders, she looked like a gobsmacked goldfish. This was all told to me by the detective assigned to my case. I didn't witness the arrest myself. I've been in contact with the other people from my college friend group that also knew Lucy, and they all expressed a mix of sympathy, mild surprise, and appreciation for me giving them a heads up. One of my friends actually had a situation a couple years ago where Lucy threatened to hurt my friend's dog after she cut contact with Lucy. But nothing ended up happening, so they forgot about it and moved on with life. My husband and I are searching for lawyers to help us with filing a restraining order as well as exploring other possible legal actions. But we haven't gotten any replies back yet because it's the holidays. I doubt it'll be worth the time and money to sue Lucy for damages, but it's an option we're considering. The attorneys that we have had preliminary consultations with so far have all advised us not to speak to Lucy directly, nor speak too much about this situation publicly, aside from basic facts while there's pending litigation, legal considerations, so I won't be posting any more about her in the foreseeable future. Long story short, we're overall doing pretty well. The craziness has settled down a bit, and my husband and I are sticking to our planned holiday festivities. A little background information. I am 29 female, and I have a precious 3-year-old daughter. My daughter enjoys playing in our backyard, and our family enjoys barbecuing, and have many family gatherings. Our neighbor has a 4-year-old daughter who would often play with my daughter. We live in a very safe neighborhood, but my neighbor, about 3 months ago, bought a dog, a black Doberman Pinscher. This dog is aggressive and scary, and has a bark that makes the hair on your legs stand up. Unfortunately, there was nothing that I could say because the dog was my neighbor's property and never came into my yard at first. I just stopped having my daughter play with the neighbor's daughter. About 3 months ago, the neighbor's dog tore at the fence vigorously and made a hole in the fence and would periodically come into my yard. The dog would eat the leftover burgers that were in the garbage and make a mess. The dog would also scare my daughter and bark until she was in tears. I begged the neighbor to fix the fence and halt the insanity. One day, the dog even bit my precious daughter. Thank the good Lord that she was not injured. We were having some work done on our pool, roof, and the side of the house, and there was hazardous material. The dog came into the yard and was eating random stuff, and even inedible poisonous objects. I felt bad that the dog had eaten something hazardous and ultimately got sick and died. The neighbor asked me for funeral expenses of $200 USD for the dog. I refused to pay anything as the dog was really trespassing. My husband told me later that night to just pay the neighbor $200, but I feel out of principle that I shouldn't pay her. Am I the a-hole for not assisting in my neighbor's dog's funeral fees? I don't believe your story. Why didn't you block the hole in the fence? Why did you leave it there so this dog would come over and apparently bite your kid? Why didn't you stop it biting your kid? I assume you were there. And what kind of poisonous objects could you have in your garden? Maybe neighbor suspects you left these poisonous objects on purpose, and that's why he's asking you to cover the expenses.